Economic Freedom Fighters gears up for its third National People's Assembly, where it is to elect new leaders. The EFF has faced several challenges this year, from its May general election performance to several members leaving the party for the newly formed MK party, notably Deputy Leader Floyd Shabambu. They're expecting members to attend in their numbers for a 4-day event that gets underway here in Johannesburg. Let's talk more about it with the party's Gauteng provincial chairperson, Nkululeko Dunga. Nkululeko, good morning. Thanks again for your time. This is being billed as the toughest political moment that Julius Malema will face. He has already described 2024 as being a painful year, losing support in national and provincial elections. You know there have been major defections from your party, and the future of the party is what is at stake now. Given all of this, how are you approaching this conference as the leadership there?
Well, thank you for having us. And greetings to you and greetings to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Yes, indeed, the EFF is going to its third NPA. Today is registration and we'll begin the formal program tomorrow. We've had our fair share of challenges as an organization, but also as a political party within the greater ecosystem of the world in itself. You know, this is the term particularly that also had the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, as part of its challenges. Nonetheless, the EFF has risen above the occasion and gained strength on a daily basis. Yes, we have had our numerous challenges, particularly this year, having looked at the electoral outcomes, where we have slightly dropped, and we refer to slightly a drop in comparison with other political parties as well, you know. So we have really held the fort under the leadership of the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, and we are hopeful and we are mindful and that we just genuinely need to go back to the ground, put on our boots, tie our shoelaces, and really engage society and put in the hard work and do what we do best in order to rebuild this organization that was built 11 years ago.
When you talk, Nkululeko, about gaining
we can
strength,
get through it.
Sorry, I want to come to this, as you say, every day you're gaining strength. When you say that, what are you referring to?
We are referring to the membership database of the EFF on a continuous basis. We have people who are joining in their masses, the Economic Freedom Fighters. The structures of the EFF has just been recently reconvened, you know, for their branch people's assembly or branch general assemblies, and it's a reflection of the conference itself, with the delegation of almost 3,000 people who are coming down to participate in the National People's Assembly, who come from branches that have recently convened their structural meetings at a branch level. They've had and continuously have programs of action. Just of recently here in Gauteng, we had a very huge march, in excess of 10,000 people who had pledged their commitment to fighting corruption under the guise of the Economic Freedom Fighters and being led by the Commander-in-Chief. So that's what we are referring to in terms of the rebuilding process of the organization amidst all the challenges that we're faced with.
So when you say people are now joining, you know, in numbers, their mass joinings, what would you say, or perhaps just share some of the numbers with us, pre-election? What was the membership of the EFF, and what is the EFF's membership now?
The organizational report will give a thorough reflection in terms of the status of membership of the EFF holistically. That's what we get it from when we start with our official proceedings, and that is led by the Secretary General, Marshal Dlamini. But where we are standing at is that you have noted that we went through a program of action of the EFF, which was 1 million membership. About 2 years ago as the Economic Freedom Fighters, and we really reached that level. In Gauteng, we had about 250,000 members who were in good standing. That slightly dropped obviously, as we headed towards the election, because people then had to renew their membership, and we had also had to engage in that process of membership renewal, which we have certainly achieved. So not a single ward of the EFF has less than 100 members in good standing. And many of those wards had to go through a process of a renewal or a new recruitment of membership so that we can really comply with the guidelines of the National People's Assembly for us to get to where we are. So every single delegate that you would have seen or that you are still going to see and witness in this National People's Assembly has a constituency of no less than 100 people who actively participated. And we can safely tell you that, particularly in Gauteng, our membership in terms of our wards is nothing less than 150 per ward, which is a signal of confidence, particularly for members of society who rally behind the EFF and in support of it.
Well, I mean, only you know how many branches there are. So what is the number then, if, as you say, at least, you know, their numbers exceed at least 100?
So in Gauteng, the branches that have met the guidelines in terms of also having had 10% of the voters or voters' support at your branch level, we're looking at about, it's 279 to be exact. So that's the number of branches that will be representing the EFF in Gauteng moving forward.
All right. What I was looking for was more a consolidated number overall. But as you say, we'll look for those in your organizational report when we do hear it. We know in Khululeko that the objectives for the National People's Assembly is to, you want to elect new leaders. You're going to table those reports, one of which we've just discussed, and you're going to relook at some of the policies. What might be policies that you either reinvent, change, or add to the EFF's agenda?
Yeah, so it's not a question of might want. It's a necessity that is enshrined in the constitution of the EFF that every 5 years we have to go through a process of renewal, which would mean that the structures of the EFF at a national level gets to be elected, because we subscribe to elected leadership. We don't run through some dictatorial process where people are just appointing themselves as leaders. In here, we elect leaders, and that's what the Constitution is expecting of us to do, and that's what the Central Command team has really led us to, as hence we find ourselves now in the doors of the third NPA. There are numerous proposals, you know, that have been thoroughly engaged by structures of the EFF, fundamentally organizational renewal. You know, we're looking at the shifting of just the minimum of 100 members to constitute a ward, and our discussions revolve around that. We should have that increased to at least 200 members in terms of what should constitute a branch in good standing, should have at least a minimum of 200 members who are in good standing, meaning that they've paid 10 rand and they've signed the form and they're actively participating at a ward level. There are also discussions in terms of the doing away or the removal of regional structures to be constitutional, and having a look at them at least to be coordinating structures with the introduction of sub-regional structures, because as we went into elections, we realized that we can do much more greater work once we have an intimate relationship with voting districts and you know, and really get down to the street level. And too many structures in an organization creates too much red tape where we really cannot come down to the structures, even when there are challenges for us to intercept and try and correct in time.
Well, so let me pick up on that point in Khululeko before you move on. By your party's own admission, many branches are not functioning effectively, do not have programs of action, and, quote, do not meet regularly to decide on the work that must be pursued to win over the masses to the struggle for economic freedom. How does the conference approach this? I mean, this is really where the rubber hits the road. How are you planning on turning that around?
That's definitely it. I mean, one of the reasons is that there's two there's a gap that would exist, particularly between the central command team and the province, and subsequently the regional structures, as hence the need to have a conversation to do away with regional structures, so that really we can have a more intimate relationship with branches and subject them through a process of vigorous interrogation of programs and meetings and accountability at all material times and conditions. And it's our assertion and it's our diagnosis in terms of the structural challenges that we're faced with. And we found a discussion way of genuinely coming up with a solution in terms of how we're going to tackle that solution. And this is just one of them.
Well, let's talk about the internal culture of the EFF and Khululeko. I'm really interested in that. And what comes to mind are issues of distrust. We heard Malema talk about trust and betrayal quite palpably recently when he was asked to name people that he felt had betrayed him. He said, don't ask me to name and shame disloyal people. That's like committing suicide. It doesn't seem like things are healthy and robust, are they?
No, they definitely are. The organizational culture of the EFF is collective leadership, it's democratically elected leadership, it's hard work, it's discipline, it's respect. But in all of that, there are human elements that plan to obviously disrupt the posture of the organization in terms of its culture. And it's understandable to a certain degree because you are dealing with humans at times who can be dishonest. We are dealing with humans at times who can have self-interest that goes beyond the organizational mandate or the interest of the organization holistically, but in all fairness, the organization does not create human beings. We only mobilize them and recruit them, and find a way to indoctrinate them into being revolutionaries. And in our mobilization of societies, that we are going to find faults and the factory faults of the revolution in itself. And the revolution is a good way of discarding those who are dishonest with the mandate of the organization. And it should not be seen as a personal battle or a personality battle, but just as a way of trying to safeguard the interest of the people outside of personal interest in itself, and to ensure that the organization is intact.
You say that the role is to mobilize and recruit, but part of the role is also to lead people that you bring into the organization. When you talk about there are human elements who plan to disrupt the organizational culture, humans who are dishonest and who are self-interested, and that you discard those who are dishonest, what are you talking about exactly here?
We're talking about all those who have left the EFF. They've always had an attempt to try and disrupt and destabilize the organization. They've left. We are very much happy where we are. We're extremely stable. Everything is well. Everything is going all right. We're going to have a smooth conference. We're going to have a leadership that is extremely united and move society and South Africa forward.
Are you including or excluding Floyd Shivambu?
Well, he left.
Well, you just said all the people who left are those people. This is what you mean by those who are dishonest and have self-interest and all of these negative attributes. I'm asking whether you're including or excluding him in that description.
Yeah, I think the shoe fits in this case. He's one of those who have left.
All right. Well, I mean, when we talk about, as you say, there is this collective leadership in the party, that the organizational culture is as it should be. The public looks at, and potential voters or members of your party look at things like the public shaming of officials, for example, who were barred from attending your 10th anniversary, those 439 public representatives after they failed to provide transport. I mean, you remember the saga. Some of those people were influential people. Some would say people like Vusi Khoza, for example, who was a former EFF KwaZulu-Natal chairperson, who was responsible at one point for driving the growth of the party in the province. I think something like 70,000 votes in the 2014 national elections to more than 300,000 in the 2019 polls. And I guess the question is whether the party in Nkululeko internally has miscalculated how it manages performance and dissent. Do you think the conference is going to address these issues? You might see a change in the way people who are dissenting voices and who perhaps are challenging voices in the EFF are managed.
No, look, there's a difference between having a dissenting view, a dissenting voice. And, you know, we are privileged enough to be in the structures of the EFF where we have a thorough understanding that we'll not see things the same. We'll only see things differently. But collectively, we engage and resolve, and after that resolve, a decision is then taken, and then we all rally behind that particular decision. That's what democratic centralism as a principle is. It's not just one person giving a command. We have never had that in the EFF. It's always done through a well-coordinated engagement and a process that leads up to the decisions that are taken in the organization. Now, you have people who, in this particular case, don't have a dissenting view because the decision was then taken and we all rallied behind that decision, but seek to defy that decision. I mean, why would you defy a decision that says to you that as a public representative, you are given almost a year to try and procure one bus? And you fail to do just that. And not only do you fail to do that, but you also mobilize other members of the EFF to defy an organizational position. And then you must not be held to account because that is seen as a dissenting view. It's not a dissenting view. It's ill-discipline, and it must be rejected. It must be isolated and subsequently even removed. We could have and should have, by the way, removed much more than we did because in our attempt to ensure that there's discipline, would always be a counter where people would be lobbied, and structures of the EFF would be lobbied to counter the decisions that are done organizationally in its attempt to destabilize it. That we cannot allow. That is capture.
All right, so the big part of this is the marquee moment. My final question in Nkululeko is dealing with the leadership, the new potential leadership of the EFF. You don't have a deputy president. I know that National Chair Veronica Mente and former SG Godrich Gadi are said to be in the lead there, the front runners. So the nominations, I would love for you to talk to us about the nominations and whether there is a possibility that the EFF could emerge with a new leader.
Look, either way you look at it, the EFF is going to emerge with new leadership because they are going to dissolve the current central command team structures in conference at plenary, and then would have to go into a process of the election of the new leadership that will then emerge. As to whether those who currently serve in particular offices retain their positions, it's the conference and plenary that will then decide. So with that being said, you can have the confidence that we are going to in as much as the National People's Assembly, there's a significant or insignificant portion of it, depends on how you look at it, that will resolve on electing new leadership. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
Is it likely that Julius Malema could be replaced by someone else in the party as leader of the EFF?
Every single member of the EFF has a right to vote and be voted for. And therefore, if plenary decides otherwise from the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, it will be on the decision of the delegates of the National People's Assembly. But we can safely tell you now that the Provincial General Assembly of the EFF in Gauteng pronounced itself to state that we have very much utmost confidence in the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, to take us forward.
EFF Gauteng Chairperson Nkululeko Dunga, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.